Sometimes that's why we're not successful in making disciples, is because we don't believe what we're selling. The second commandment that I wanted to talk about today is to teach. Okay, Peter, on the day of Pentecost. Let's go back here for a moment. Acts chapter 2. I want you to notice something. He made disciples. He got the enrollment. But the church does not stop with the enrollment. Oftentimes we believe that if we get somebody and they believe in Jesus Christ and they're baptized for the remission of their sins, we believe, yes, we've got another Christian, and it's all hands off. It doesn't work that way. Marietta College doesn't get the enrollment and take the tuition and say, all right, we're done. We understand that in the secular learning, that getting the tuition, getting the student in the classroom is only the beginning. We've got to see that student from the first day of school clear through graduation. As a fifth grader, I struggled with reading at the fifth grade. Some of my kids are slow learners and readers too. I did not read well. I failed my third and fourth grade achievement test. My mother was absolutely at her wit's end. She was desperate. Finally, she had a school teacher to do an evaluation on me at the end of the fourth grade. And I will never forget what that teacher said to my parents. He examined my school books. He talked with me at length. Finally, he looked at my parents and specifically at my mother, and he said, he's not learning because he doesn't want to. And I remember feeling this light bulb in my mind and saying, he's absolutely right. I don't want to read. After all, I had a younger brother that could read everything to me I ever wanted. Why would I want to learn? He told my mother this. He said, and he used an analogy, and I've tried to remember exactly the way he phrased it. I believe he said, I've got a son about the same age, and I sent him out to the car to pick up 2 bags of groceries, and he complains about how heavy they are. But I'm looking out there in the field, he's building a tree house, and he's carrying boards that are 3 times as heavy as a bag of groceries. Why? Because he wants to. He thinks it's fun. He looked at my mother, he said, you've got to learn how to make school fun for this boy or he'll never learn. You've got to pick topics that he's interested in or he'll never learn. Why do I ask you guys to provide me with sermon topics? Because I want to preach what you're interested in. It doesn't do me any good if you're not interested. And I think here's where it ties in. One of the main reasons, if you look at national polls, one of the main reasons people today don't go to church is because they view church as outdated and disconnected from reality. And I dare say a lot of them are correct in a lot of ways. I dare say that if you take church, broad sense, not this congregation here necessarily, but if you take church as a broad sense of the word, most churches are probably very disconnected from reality. I remember my mother criticizing. She'd come to Mass with Dad, the Catholic Church, and she'd say, can you tell me how in the world a Catholic priest can talk about child training and rearing when they're not even married. We can talk about things that are Bible even though we're not there, and they can be relative. But the truth is, sometimes we can be so disconnected from what we're going through, other people are going through as individuals. We become so wrapped up in our lives. Sometimes we are disconnected. In order to save souls and to build the church, we have to be willing to meet people where they are. I want you to notice something. The Apostle Paul and the other apostles, they didn't wait for folks to come and ask them what they believed. They engaged people right where they were, and they taught them. Acts chapter 17. We were there a moment ago, but I want to go a little further back in the chapter. I want to take you to Athens, Greece. We go to Athens, Greece. Now, I've never been here, but if I ever go over to this part of the world, I would like to stand on Mars Hill in Athens, Greece, where the Apostle Paul stood. My English Standard Bible uses the old Greek word instead of Mars Hill. But if you're reading from the King James Version, it'll call this location Mars Hill. Acts chapter 17, I want you to begin with me in verse 16. And as they were going to a place of prayer, they were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination. Oops, wrong chapter. Chapter 17, that's chapter 16. Sermon for a different day. Now, while Paul and Silas were waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was provoked within him. Paul's moved. He saw the city was full of idols. Paul sees something. He's moved in his soul. Now, drop down to verse 22. After Paul has observed this, so Paul, standing in the midst of Areopagus, that's Mars Hill, said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along, I observed the objects of your worship. I found also an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he had need of anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. And having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God, and perhaps feel their way towards him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, or an image formed by the art and the imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he appointed, and of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. And now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, but others said, We will hear you again about this. So Paul went out from their midst. But, notice verse 34, But some men joined him and believed. Among them also were Dornarius and Aragapet and a woman named Damaris and others with them. You see, Paul didn't wait for people to come and ask him what he believed. He stood right there in the middle of Mars Hill, right among the statues, right among the idolatry that had moved him to first speak. He said, let me share with you what I believe. Let me show you the God of creation. Now, success at Athens, Greece was not the greatest place, but there was success. Our preaching needs to be like the Apostle Paul's. We need to use some salt. Paul didn't just simply leave the Christians at Athens, Greece alone. He continued his teaching with them. Jesus says, you are the salt of the world. Well, what's he say about salt? Matthew chapter 5, a lot of times we just want to say, oh, we're the salt of the world. Well, what's he say if salt doesn't do its job? Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. You're as salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how will its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. It's only good for driveways. Put it on there to keep some mud out of your boots. We need to add some salt sometimes to what we're putting out there.